Silent Hill, the history of nurses explained. The majority of people have visited a hospital at some time in their lives. It may have been to pay a visit, work, or even seek therapy. People have so many various sorts of recollections from their time in hospitals. Each person's opinion of nurses is unique. Silent Hill is a survival horror game released by Konami in 1999. It was created by Team Silent, a Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo studio, and published by Konami. The game was published from February to July and was the first in the Silent Hill series. Monsters abound in Silent Hill, representing the greatest fears, sorrows, and sufferings of those unlucky enough to be stuck within. The nurse is one of the creatures that has stayed with players the longest and has appeared on the most protagonists. Since the first game on the original PlayStation, the nurses of Silent Hill have been featured. The protagonists' look in most Silent Hill titles vary due to the continually shifting protagonists and the diverse themes of each Silent Hill. Some modifications are more noticeable, while others are very subtle. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who are the nurses? In the Silent Hill series, the nurse is a regular foe. Along with Pyramid Head, they are the franchise's most recognizable characters and elements. Nurses can be seen at Alchemilla Hospital and Brookhaven Hospital and roaming the streets of Silent Hill, armed with knives, lead pipes, and occasionally firearms and syringes. They've also been discovered in locations that make little sense, such as the buried basement floor of a town hall in a separate town. They are graphically comparable across the series and have many common qualities, except for the first Silent Hill, which has an undefined continuity that gets more distinct in Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill's village, which works as a mirror of concerns and phobias, manifests monsters, and each game usually includes a visit to Alchemilla Hospital, which houses the town's emergency room in Old Silent Hill, and Brookhaven Hospital, which houses long-term patients and the mentally ill in South Vale, due to the reoccurring theme of hospitalization, insanity, and death. Once inside the hospital, the player will almost always run against creatures summoned by the town that resemble misshapen, disfigured nurses. Although the nurses in the original Silent Hill game wore much older apparel, including cardigans, than modern-day nurses' scrubs, these monsters often wear uniforms that mirror contemporary nurses. Evolution of Silent Hill nurses throughout the games. Puppet doctors who only appear in this game are their male counterparts. They're known as the puppet nurses in the Silent Hill game. They are brunette or blonde-haired women wearing blue or green cardigans and matching skirts with white shirts. They are the nurses that worked at Alchemilla Hospital before becoming enslaved by parasites. The same parasite subsequently assaults Sybil Bennett due to Acela Gillespie's abilities, resulting in their humpbacked look. They wield scalpels and attack the players with them. They have some intelligent behavior when there are two or more of them. One will keep Harry Mason immobile so the other nurses may stab him. Bubblehead nurses are the nurses in Silent Hill 2's Brookhaven Hospital. They come from protagonist James Sunderland's imagination, merging his fears about his wife's fatal sickness with the carnal deprivation that came with it. The nurses are dressed in low-cut blouses with the first few buttons undone. Their heads are bloated and wrapped in gauze and tremble furiously as if it was about to explode. Their bloodied, exposed jaws and teeth are their sole noticeable face feature. They attack with steel pipes, and if James is caught in a place with numerous amounts of them, they will swarm him. The nurses in Silent Hill 3 have a more human look than in Silent Hill 2. Their hair is all cut in black bob cuts, and they have the same busty look as the Bubblehead nurses. Blood is visibly smeared all around their lips, indicating that they have either coughed up blood or had been feasting on a gory cadaver. They create loud panting noises and scream blood-curdling cries when hurt. They also have weapons, either steel pipes or a handgun. They will assault more significantly if the sun is used in the hospital. The nurses in Silent Hill Origins are highly comparable to the Bubblehead nurses, except their heads do not twitch, and they wear surgical gloves and surgical masks formed of flesh attached to their faces. They come in two colors, a red flesh-like variant at Alchemilla Hospital and a green rendition in Cedar Grove Sanitarium. Although there is no discernible difference in appearance, they use syringes and scalpels to assault. They are the butcher's most regular victims. On his second visit, Travis witnessed one being slaughtered in the butcher shop and discovered another split open outside the business. Nurses appear in several areas throughout Silent Hill Homecoming. They look and move just like the nurses in the film version, and they react to Alex Shepard's torchlight and loud noises, in the same way being drawn to them right away. They frequently appear in bunches and strike with violence, wielding long knives. The achievement Alchemilla's Finest is awarded to the player after killing a nurse for the first time. Bubblehead nurses only appear in the surprise ending when they join James, Mary, Laura, Heather, and the rest of the Silent Hill Downpour cast at Murphy Pendleton's surprise birthday celebration. The nurses in Silent Hill, the arcade, have a similar appearance to those in Silent Hill 3, but their faces are bandaged and their hair is now shoulder length and well groomed. They walk with awkward bounding leaps and wield either a steel pipe or a handgun, and are first seen strolling through Brookhaven Hospital with double heads. They become angrier and more vicious after beating Pyramid Head. In Silent Hill Book of Memories, Bubblehead's Nurses spin-off game shows up in great numbers. They resemble the nurses from the movies with low-cut blouses and contoured features. They are one of the game's most prevalent foes. Silent Hill, Dark Nurses from Movies Explored. In this case, the nurses dubbed Dark Nurses make a cameo in the Silent Hill film at the conclusion. They dress similarly to the Bubblehead nurse as Brookhaven Hospital nurses, with low-cut shirts, short skirts, and distorted and twisted features. They are huddled in a clump in Brookhaven's basement, frozen in place in contoured and weird poses, clutching a weapon such as a pipe or a knife. Rose da Silva shines her beam on them to squirm and stomp in response, forming rows in front of her like an army. They shuffle toward her, leaning backward and sideways while making horrible cracking noises. Their motions are complex and seemingly mechanical with brief, sharp gaps between them. Rose then switches off her light, recognizing that it is the source of their attraction. Forcing them to freeze in place once more, she sneaks up on them, weaving her way between the horde of beasts, but she is discovered. One nurse swings out with her blade, missing Rose and slashing the throat of another nurse nearby. The nurse continues to spin in circles, stabbing the other nurses around her wildly and brutally, yet with lethal accuracy. Rose takes advantage of the chaos by fleeing, leaving her light on the ground. Perhaps she did this out of sympathy, diverting the monster's attention away from the horrific rampage. Alessa Gillespie's distorted perception of her nurse, Lisa Garland, is likely represented by the film nurses. They might also express jealousy since Alessa would finally learn that she would never grow up to be a beautiful lady because of her severely burnt and scorched skin and her damaged physique, which remains thus even after 30 years, which might explain why the nurses appear to be sexualized, displaying some cleavage. Because they didn't have faces, it's impossible that Alessa never became attached to any of the nurses at the infirmary and that they were all faceless to her. In the sequel Silent Hill Revelation, the nurse appears at the Brookshaven Asylum chamber where Vincent Cooper is being kept hostage by two order members. They look exactly like the dark nurses from the prologue. They are drawn to even the tiniest sound and will stop moving if there is no sound. They strike out in a rash manner, injuring one another as well as adversaries. The order soldiers employ shock rods to keep the nurses away as they approach the room loudly, but they are swamped and murdered nevertheless. The nurses freeze the instant they are dead. However, Vincent is still confined because there is no way he can leave without creating noises and drawing the nurses. Heather Mason frees Vincent, and the two contrive to flee the nurses. The nurses' actresses studied particular choreography for the sequence because being blindfolded and instructed to execute in response to whatever sound Vincent made. Heather, who just found out that she is attracted to a guy for the first time, is most likely a depiction of Alessa as she grows up. Heather's attraction to Vincent may also be reflected in the nurses' portrayal of Heather as protective of him. The nurses have appealing bodies but no faces, resulting in a lack of personality and individuality, which might refer to Heather's worry about losing him to other women who have all the beauty but no personality. They may also be interpreted as Alessa's recollections of her stay in Brookhaven Hospital resurfacing. Silent Hill, Nurses in the Comics. Most of the game-based demons featured in the Silent Hill comics by IDW Publishing are mainly employed as background filler. The nurses are an exception. owing to their prominence in the Silent Hill franchise. Nurses feature in the following comics in various capacities. Dying Inside. Troy Abernathy discovered his deceased wife dressed as a nurse with a knife shoved into her neck and her head, growing like a bubblehead nurse even though they are not monsters in this comic. While approaching him, she says that he used to love it when I put this thing on. She represents Troy's suppressed sexual desires as well as his grief at his wife's demise. Paint It Black. A nurse is the subject of a painting by Ike Isaacs. Though inspired by the bubblehead nurse from Silent Hill 2, the design looks to be unique. Hunger. Some of the nurses are seen being shot at the Silent Hill police force, backed up by an insane cancer. The nurses are inspired by the Silent Hill 3 nurses. In addition to this brief apparition, a deceased nurse who Dr. Ackman previously employed attempts to assault Douglas Brenneman when the doctor is being interviewed, but Brenneman dispatches her. Dead Alive. A couple of nurses are tasked with prepping Connie Mills to serve as a conduit for Samuel's essence. The faceless nurse from Silent Hill Origins appears to be the inspiration for these nurses. A nurse can also be spotted in Troy Abernathy's jazz club. Sinner's Reward. Gillian Conway, who selected her fate as a gesture of forgiveness for a life of immortality, is murdered by a gang of nurses. The nurses look precisely like those in the movie Silent Hill Homecoming.
You okay? What?
Legacy of nurses in Silent Hill. Over the years, nurses in Silent Hill have evolved, but their core purpose has remained the same. They are an iconic part of the game alongside the Pyramid Head character. Apart from cosmetic changes, the nurses have maintained their position throughout the series. They have been used extensively to objectify women with their skimpy outfits. On several occasions, they also provide jump scares to keep the very essence of the horror adventure game within their severely disfigured appearance. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.